Hey Chevra, what's going on? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Dalet of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 84. Daf 84 really deals with the machlokas that we saw at the end of the Daf yesterday between Rav and Shmuel about what happens in a situation when you have a chatzer and you have a mirpesed, right? You have a chatzer and in the chatzer is a two-story building. And the bottom story opens up into the chatzer, and the second floor you walk up to it with a ladder, and then there's an area before the apartments on the second floor where they could probably put like a sukkah or whatever, and then you go into the chatzer, into the apartments on the second floor from this like area on the second level. So we had said that if you have a space in the chatzer that is 10 tfachim tall, okay, so if it's let's say the second story was 20 tfachim off the ground, then you have this thing that is 10 tfachim tall. So from the perspective of the chatzer, it's inconvenient for them to use it because it's more than 10 tfachim. And also from the perspective of the second story, it's also inconvenient for them to use it because they have to bend down in order to get to it. So that's what's called laze b'zrika v'laze b'shilshul, right? If that for the chatzer it's zrika, it's like they have to throw something to get it on top of it, and for the upper story they have to bend down in order to reach it. So the question is whose rishus is it considered, right? This thing that's 10 tfachim tall, let's say it's a pile of sorts and it's 10 tfachim tall, so is the pile the part of the rishus of the second story, or is it part of the rishus of the ground level? So Rav had said that it's it essentially is usher to both of them, and Shmuel says that actually in this case we can consider it to be the rishus of the second story, because when you have a situation of zrika and shilshul, when one person will have to raise up to get to something, whereas the other one would have to bend down to get to it, it's more convenient for the person to bend down, therefore we can consider it to be theirs. We are now going to be essentially discussing this machlokas for the entire daf today. The first amud is manageable, the second amud isn't. Well, really just the end of it isn't. I mean, it's manageable to an extent. We'll get through it. We won't get stuck here forever, but it really gets quite difficult at the end. Chavre, let's go weiter. So let's start from where are we? So if we laze b'shilshul laze b'zrika mai. So the Gemara asks about 8 lines before the bottom of the page on Pei Gimel Amud Beis. So laze b'shilshul laze b'zrika mai. What happens when, let's say you have a pile in the chatzer and it's 10 tfachim tall, and the second story is 20 tfachim, let's say, above the ground. So so for the people on the ground level, right, it would be bizrika, right? Meaning when it's convenient, it's called a pesach, right? A pesach is an entryway, something that's convenient to use. But when it's inconvenient because it's too tall, it's called bizrika. When it's inconvenient because it's too low, it's called bishilshul. So when you have a situation that laze bizrika, that for the people in the chatzer it's going to be bizrika, it's going to be tall. For the people on the second story, it's going to be bishilshul, it's going to be low. So then Amar Rav says Rav Shnei Asurin. Well, then nobody can use this pile. Shmuel Amar says Shmuel knows, and also the zesha b'shilshul. So you give it to the second story, the ones who have to bend down in order to access it. Shelazet tashmishu b'nachas v'lazet tashmishu b'kasher. Because in a situation when you have lazeh b'zrika v'lazeh b'shilshul, so it's considered more convenient for the second story for those who bend down to access it. And as we know, whenever you have a situation where it is convenient for one chatzer to use it and inconvenient for the other one, so we give access to the chatzer for whom it is more convenient to access. Now we are going to be asking kashas for the rest of the daf, sometimes on Rav, sometimes on Shmuel. We are going to begin with a Mishnah that supports Shmuel. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Anshe Chatzav, Anshe Mepeses, Sheshachachu v'lo ervu. So when you have this chatzer and you have the second story, and they forgot and they didn't make an eruv together. Kol shegavoa asar tfachim. So if you have something, if you have, let's say, a pile that's 10 tfachim tall, So the mirpeses, well then it is considered part of the chatzar of the mirpeses. Pachas mikan, but if it's less than 10 tvachim tall lechatzar, well then it's considered part of the rishus of the chatzar. Excuse me. Wow, I think that almost came out my ears. So then if it's less than 10 tvachim tall, so then it'll be considered the rishus of the chatzar. Now, so we're assuming we're thinking at this point that what does it mean the mirpeses, the second level? It means the apartments on the second level, meaning not just that you take a tent and pitch a tent on the ground of the second floor. So like, imagine to get up to the second level, you would go up a ladder or something. So it's not like when you get up the ladder to the second landing, you just have like a tent over there. The assumption for now is that then, actually interestingly enough, the art scroll and their diagrams, they actually have like an additional ladder that takes you up a little bit higher up to where the doorway to get into the house is. And we're assuming that we're talking about the people in the house. So therefore, if we're talking about the people in the house and not just people camping out on the landing, well then that's really going to be more than 10 tfachim above the top of this pile of stuff. And therefore, it's going to be a situation of shilshul, right? Meaning they're going to be bending down in order to get this stuff, and it's more than 10 tfachim away, and still we're saying that it's considered part of their rishus. So therefore it's a support for Shmuel, who says that when you have lazeb izrika, the lazeb is shilshul, we give it to the people who have shilshul. Okay. So v'amai karula mirpeses, the kasalke b'mirpeses. So then, if we're talking about the people in their apartments, the bnei aliyah, then why are we calling them the bnei mirpeses? So, well, because the way to get to their apartments is by way of the by way of the landing, by way of this mirpeses. So therefore, we call them bnei mirpeses, even though really we're talking about bnei aliyah, and it's a support for Shmuel. Alma. So therefore we see that whenever you have a situation that for one of them it's going to be bezrika and one of them it's going to be b'shilshul, we give it to the ones who bend down to get it, and there you have it. So the people in these upper story apartments are more than 10 tfachim away from the top of this pile, and yet we still consider it to be in their rishus, since when you have zrika versus shilshul, so then it goes by the chevre shebeshilshul. Okay. Kida Amar Rav Huna La'osan Adarim b'mirpeses. So Rav Huna answers and says, no, it's not necessarily a proof for Shmuel, because it's like, right? No, so the Gemara answers Kida Amar Rav Huna that it's like Rav Huna says. And we're going to see where Rav Huna says this in a little bit, but just like Rav Huna says in this other case, La'osan Adarim b'mirpeses, that it's talking about the people who actually live on that landing itself, right? It's not talking about the people in the apartments above the landing. It's talking about the people on the landing themselves. So so here also it's not talking about the people in the apartments above the landing, it's talking about the people actually on the second landing, and therefore the top of the pile is within reach, and that is why it's considered their part of their chatzar, because it's convenient for them to use and it's inconvenient for the people in the chatzar to use. But if that's the case, that we're talking about the people on the landing, ema seifa, but I'll tell you the end of the Mishnah, pachas mikan lechatzer, that if the pile is less than 10 tfachim from the ground, if it's less than 10 tfachim tall, well then it is the property, it is considered in the rishus of the people of the chatzar. But amai, if we're saying that we're talking about the people on the second story being the people on the landing, lazeb pesach v'lazeb pesach hu. Well, if that's the case, then it'll be a situation of where it's convenient for both of them to use it, right? Meaning, if we're talking about the people like mamish on the landing, and you have the people in the chatzar, and you have some pile that's less than 10 tfachim, well, it'll be convenient for both the people in the chatzar and the people on the mirpeses to be able to reach it. So then, if that's the case, why should it belong to the people of the chatzar? Since both of them are able to reach it, it should be usher to both of them. So the Gemara answers, yeah, that's true. My lechatzer, af lechatzer, shnei asurin. Yeah, what does it mean to the chatzar? It means even to the chatzar, and both of them are forbidden. Meaning, it's right. Both the chatzar and the landing are able to reach this pile, and therefore it is forbidden to both of them. Just like a window that's between, just like when you have a wall dividing two chatzars, and there's a window, it's also to both of them as well. And this also makes sense from the fact that we learn in the Sefer that when do we say that when the pile is more than 10 tfachim, it belongs to the second story. So bismucha, when the pile is close to the second story. Right, bismucha, but if it's far away from the second story, afilu gavoa yud tfachim, even if it's 10 tfachim tall, then lichatzer, then it belongs to the chatzer, right? So if you have this pile and it's 10 tfachim tall, so on the one hand we said if it's 10 tfachim tall, it belongs to the mirpeset, to the second story. But we also said that if it's far away, even if it's 10 tfachim tall, then it belongs to the chatzer. But what does it mean that it belongs to the chatzer? If it means that, well, since it's far away from the second story, it belongs to the chatzer, and the chatzer can use it. Amai, why should the chatzer be able to use it? It's both of their properties, although the truth is what it means is that it's neither of their properties, meaning it's equally difficult for both of them to access it, right? Because on the one hand, the people in the chatzer, it's difficult for them to access it because it's more than 10 tfachim tall, and the people from the mirpeset, even though it's 10 tfachim tall, it's difficult for them to access it because it's far away. So therefore, it should be forbidden to both of them. Why are we saying that it belongs to the chatzer? So elamai lechatzer af lechatzer v'shnein asurin. Rather, what does it mean that if it's more than 10 tfachim away from the second level, then it belongs to the chatzer? It means it even belongs to the chatzer. i.e., it's equally difficult for both of them to access it, and therefore neither of them can use this pile if it's 10 tfachim tall and far away from the second story. So therefore, also in our case, where you have this pile that's below 10 tfachim tall, and it's close to the so it's within 10 tfachim of the ground, and it's close to the second story. In that case, it belongs, right? It's convenient for both of them to use it, and therefore neither one will be able to use it. Tanan, we learn in our Mishnah chulia sabor ve'asela. So if you have a pit and you dig out this pit and you take the dirt and you put it around the pit. So let's say you dig out the pit, 5 tfachim tall, and now you have dirt that's another 5 tfachim tall around the pit. So now it's a total of 10 tfachim, right? Meaning the point is that you're digging out a pit and you're taking all the dirt that you dig out and you're putting it around the whole of the pit to kind of make it even a deeper pit. Fine. So, ve'asela, or if you have a rock, and this rock is 10 tfachim tall, so shnein gvoin asara limir peses. So if they are both 10 tfachim tall, right? Meaning if the rock is 10 tfachim tall, or if the pit is 10 tfachim, I guess probably tall also, right? Meaning because you have this second level, you have the second story, and it's 10 tfachim off the ground. So let's say you dig out like a big pit in the chatzer, and all this dirt is piling up so that it's goes up to the second level. So then in both of those cases, whether you have this rock or whether you have this pit, so if it's 10 tfachim tall, it belongs to the mirpeset. Pachos mikan, if it's less than 10 tfachim tall, the chatzer belongs to the chatzer. Now the assumption is here that when we say that if this rock or this pit is 10 tfachim tall, it belongs to the mirpeset, we're assuming once again that when we say the mirpeset, we mean the apartments that the mirpeset, that the second story landing opens up into, which are a little bit further up, right? So we're higher up. So we're saying that if you have this rock or this pit and they're 10 tfachim tall, so then it's accessible to the mirpeset. We're assuming that it means to the apartments on the mirpeset, which means that they're that they're more than 10 tfachim away from this rock or this pit, and we're still saying that it's considered the rishus of the mirpeset. So we see, like Shmuel, that since these people can access it by reaching down, it's considered more convenient than the people of the chatzer, and therefore it belongs to the mirpeset. And Tzakash and Rav would say that it's also to both of them. So Amr Rav Huna, this is where Rav Huna says, the osan adarim b'mirpeset. No, it actually means the people living actually on the second story landing, not the people in the apartments above that, and therefore for them it is within reach of this stone or this pit. Now the Gemara says, Tenach Sela, I understand a pit I understand the rock. The rock would be convenient for the people on the second story landing to be able to just reach down to the rock and take something. But bor ma'ika lemeimar. But what about the pit? Meaning it's very nice that the sides of the pit go all the way up to the second story landing, but to get something out of that pit, it's going to be very, very deep. And it's going to be, inconvenient, and he's going to have to go all the way down in order to get things from the bottom of that pit. And the fact that we're saying that it's considered the property of the second story landing clearly sounds like it's Shmuel who says that that it's considered comfortable, convenient to be to take things out from to lower down, to bend down to get things from a pit. So Amar Rav Yitzchak B'Eder Rav Yehuda Halcha B'Bor Melei Hamayim Askinan. So it says Rav Yitzchak, the son of Rav Yehuda, that here we're talking about a pit that's filled with water. And because it's filled with water, so the water goes up to where the merpeset is, and it's convenient to take the water out. V'al Chesra. But as you take water out, it's gonna the level is gonna go down until it will once again become inconvenient. And still we're saying that it belongs to the merpeset. So Kevin the Chimal Yashari Ki Chesra Nami Shari. Well, since when the pit is filled, it's permitted to draw water from it. So then even when the level of the water goes down, it's still going to be permitted. Adrabah, 1 second. Let's say the opposite. Let's say the opposite, which is that since when there's when the pit is lacking water, it is asur. So then I'll say even when it has water, it's still asur nonetheless. So Ela Amar Abai rather says Abai Halcha B'Bor Melei Peris Askinan. Here we're talking about a pit that's not filled with water, it's filled with fruits. And since you can easily reach down into the pit and take some fruits, that's why it could belong to the second story. But still, you could take out, as you take out fruits, it's going to become less and less until it's inconvenient. So betivla, so it's talking about fruits that are tevel, that are muksa, and therefore you're not going to be taking them out of the pit, and you're going to be leaving there, and therefore you can kind of put things on top of the pit or whatever, and it's considered like it's in the rishus of the second story. Dekanami, you can also infer this. Dekatani, dumya, desela, that that we say that we're talking about a pit that is similar to a rock. Shmamina, right? So just like a rock is not lacking anything, so we're also talking about a pit that's not lacking anything, i.e. that it's filled up with tevel, that and you'd be able to, I guess, take things on and off of this pit. How come we need to teach both the pit and the rock if after all we're saying that they're essentially similar? So tzricha, we need it. The ashminan sela teleka lemigzar. Because if we would only know about the rock, well, that's because the rock, there's nothing to be concerned about, right? It's a rock. If it's within, or if it's 10 tefachim tall, and it's convenient for the second story landing to take things on and off of it, what's the concern? Have a bor ligzar, zimnin demalya peris misukanin. But I might think to say that by a pit, even if it's filled with fruits, maybe you still wouldn't be allowed to use it, because what about for instances where it's not filled up with tevel, it's filled up with fruit that you can eat? So maybe in that case we would say that since when it's filled with fruit that you can eat, we have to be concerned that you're gonna eat the fruits and then there's gonna be less of it and it's going to be inconvenient. So tzricha, that's why we need the Mishnah to teach us that no, we don't say that. And if you have a pit that's filled with tevel, so then you would be able to use that pit and like put things on and off of it and stuff, and we wouldn't be concerned. We wouldn't make any kind of gzeres. Okay. Tashma, come in here. Anshe chotzer v'anshe aliyah sheshachachu v'lo ervu. So if you have people in the chotzer and you have people on the second story, sheshachachu, that they forgot v'lo ervu, and they forgot to make an erev together. Anshe chotzer mishtamshim ba'asara tachtonim. So the people in the chotzer can use, if you have like a wall, right? So let's say let's say for now that we're talking about the second story was 30 tvachim off the ground, okay? So we're saying that the anshe chotzer mishtamshim ba'asara tachtonim. So the people in the chotzer are able to use the first 10 tvachim from the ground up. And the people on the second story are able to use the basically tvachim 20 to 30, right? The 10 tvachim that are closest to the second story. Keitzad, how do we see this? Ziz yotzei min hakosel limata me'asara l'chatzar. So if you have some kind of a ziz, some kind of thing jutting out of the wall, so if it's within 10 tefachim from the ground, so then it belongs to the chatzar. L'mayla me'asar la'aliyah. And if it is within 10 tefachim of the top, so let's say it's more than 20 tefachim from the ground, so then it will be the property of the second story. So now the Gemara wants to say, but let's say that if it's smack in the middle, right? So if we're saying that we're talking about that, a 30 tefach wall, well then if this thing jutting out of the wall is like smack in the middle at 15 amas, well, the implication is that it would be forbidden to both of them. So that's a kasha on Shmuel, because according to Shmuel, he says that when you have a situation of zrika and shilshul, so then we say that the people who bend down to use it, lower down to use it, they would be allowed to access it. So based on that svara, I would think that the people on the second story should be able to use this ziz when that's halfway up the wall. Yet, this brisa seems to be implying that neither of them can use it. So it sounds like Rav against Shmuel. So Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman bekosel tisha asar askinan. Here we're talking about a wall that's 19 tefachim tall. V'ziz yotzim mimenu lemata me'asara. And so if we have this thing jutting out of the wall within 10 tefachim of the ground, laza b'pesach v'laza b'shilshul, well, then it's an example, it's a situation where it's convenient for the chatzar to use it and inconvenient for the second story to use it, so therefore it belongs to the chatzar. L'mayla me'asar, and if it's more than 10 tefachim from the ground, so laza b'pesach v'laza b'zrika, well then it will be convenient for the second story to use it because it will be within 10 tefachim of the second story, but it will be difficult for the chatzar to use it since it will be above 10 tefachim. Ta, shma, come and hear. Stegzus tros, zo l'mayla mizo. Let's say you have two balconies, one above the other, okay? So imagine you have a building and you have a balcony from the building, okay? Now above that balcony, there's another balcony, okay? Now this second balcony that's higher up isn't directly above the first balcony. It's ki'ilu off to the side a little bit. So imagine, let's say you have, imagine you're looking at the building right ahead of you. So let's say you divide you make an imaginary line, halfway, across, across the building. Kilu, you have a building, and then from the ground to the top of the building, you draw an imaginary line smack in the middle. And then on the right side, there's a mirpeset, let's say, on the second floor. And then on the left side, you have a mirpeset, let's say, on the third floor, okay? So you have two mirpesets, one is higher than the other. They're not directly, above and below each other. Now, chevra, there's more to the story. These people live over a body of water, okay? So now what happens is the fellow who lives on the higher up mirpeset, on the left side of the building, he makes a hole in his mirpeset, and he also has walls around his mirpeset. And we learned about this already in Masechta Shabbos and also earlier in Masechta Ayruvin, that then what he can do is he could take a bucket attached to a rope and drop it through the hole in his mirpeset floor. Hopefully he doesn't drop himself through that hole. And then he could pull water, he could draw water from the body of water beneath him, right? Because we'll say that as long as the walls around his mirpeset are 10 tefachim tall, we could say good achis, that the wall goes down to the water, right? It's kal hu she'ekelu chacham b'mayim. It's one of the leniencies that the chacham had when it came to water. That will say that the wall goes all the way down to the water, and he takes his bucket, puts it in a hole in the floor, and he can put it down into the water. It's all considered rishus hayachid, and he can draw water that way. However, what makes this a little bit more complicated is that you have this other mirpeset that's lower down. So now we have a situation now the person on the lower down mirpeset, he could theoretically take a rope with a bucket attached to it, and he can he doesn't have he doesn't have this hole in his floor and these walls and stuff. What he wants to do is he wants to piggyback off of the upper chutzner. So he takes a rope with a bucket attached, and he chucks it up to the higher up chutzner, and he's got good aim, and it goes through the hole in the floor, down to the water, through that guy's mechitzas that he created. So now essentially you have this thing that's being used by both of them. And now for the guy in the lower one, it's bizrika, right? He's throwing it. And for the guy in the upper one, that he put the hole in his floor and he just has to lower it down, it's bishilshel. Right, so here we have a situation of laza bizrika, i.e. for the lower chatzar it's bizrika, and for the guy on top it's bishilshel. And what do we say? So tashma shtegzustro zolamayla mizo. So if you have these two balconies, one above the other, but not directly so asula elyona v'lo asula tachtona. So if the guy on the higher up balcony, on the left side of the building, so he made a hole in his floor and he had walls around his mirpeset so that he can lower his bucket down to the water and draw water. So shten asuras, both of them are asuras achi arvu until they make an eruv. So here we're saying that it's asur, even though it's a situation of laza bizrika, laza bishilshul. We're saying it's asur. It's a kasha on Shmuel, who says that in this case it would be permitted to the one who is bishilshul. So Omer Rav Ada bar Ahava. So Rav Ada bar Ahava answers for Shmuel, and he says, no, it's talking about Bibayin b'nei tachtona derech Elyona lemalos. That it's talking about where the lower down chatzar, the lower down mirpeset has a ladder, and they use that ladder to climb onto the upper mirpeset, and from there he's also going to draw water. So now it's an area that is actually shared by both of them, and both of them are going to be lowering a bucket into the water. So it's shneim bishilshul, so therefore it is going to be forbidden for both of them. But stam, a situation of laza v'zrik, of laza v'shilshul would be permitted, according to Shmuel. Abaye Amar, says Abaye, Kigon, for example, the kaimun besoch asara da'adade. So Abaye says that it's talking about where the two mirpesets are within 10 tfachim of each other. Velomi baya ka'amar. Right, and because they're both within 10 tfachim of each other, so it's not a situation, right, so it's basically convenient for both of them. So, velomi baya, right, and it's a lomi baya. Right, lomi baya asula tachtona velo asula elyona da'asire. Right, certainly if both of them, certainly if the hole was not in the upper mirpeset's floor, if it was in the lower mirpeset's floor, so in that case it would be a situation of laza b'shilshul v'laza b'shilshul, right? Because in order for if the hole was in the floor of the lower mirpeset, so then the guy from the upper mirpeset would be lowering down the bucket through the lower mirpeset, so that would be b'shilshul, and also the guy in the lower mirpeset is going to be lowering down his bucket to the water below. So that would also be bishilshul. So since shneim is bishilshul, they're going to make it forbidden on one another. Right? The kevan de bego yud the adade kaimen asrei adade. That since they're within 10 tefachim of each other, they make it forbidden on one another. Ela afilu asul elyona v'lo asul tachtona. Right? But the chiddush is that even though the hole is in the upper balcony, and there's no hole in the lower balcony, I may have thought to say, since it is more difficult for the lower balcony to access the water, since they have to chuck the bucket, through Zorayk, they have to chuck the bucket from the lower balcony to the upper balcony through the floor. So I might think, so let the guy in the upper balcony be able to have access to the water, since it's more convenient for him. Kamash Malan, what the chiddush is that Kevin to bego asara kaimin asana adade. Since they are within 10 tefachim of each other, they make it asur upon one another. However, you could answer for Shmuel that in a situation where they weren't within 10 tefachim of each other, well then we would allow the person with shilshul to be able to have access to the water, or in the cave, or the access to the resource, whether it's a pile, whether it's water, fine. Now this is where it gets a shtickle difficult. Rabbi now brings a proof, right? Kihada Amr of Nachman Amr Shmuel. It's like Rav Nachman says the name of Shmuel. Okay, Gaga Asamuch L'Rishus Harabim. Okay, Tzarich Sulam Kavua La'atiro. Okay, Sulam Kavua in Sulam Araylo. Okay, this is a very, very, very complicated example for a lot of reasons. Now, it was very difficult trying to figure out what in the world this was talking about. So, the art scroll had a diagram. It was very difficult to understand what the diagram was even talking about. I then went upstairs. My father also has an art scroll, but it's an older version the diagram that they had in the older version is different than the diagram that they have in the newer version. And then, my dad also has some other picture book that I looked at, and that diagram was even different than both of those diagrams, which means that there is no accepted understanding of what this architectural design is. Now, aside from that, there are other big questions about this, just in terms of like understanding Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabim. There are all sorts of questions about this example over here, but let's just try our best to make some way of understanding it. And so the way you kind of have to understand it is like this. You have a Rishus HaRabim, okay? Now, in that Rishus, now, there's a building just in the Rishus HaRabim, right? Up until now, we've been talking about like a 2-story building, but it's in a chutzner. There's no chutzner here. It's just Rishus HaRabim, okay? So there's Rishus HaRabim. In the Rishus HaRabim, there's this building. Now, the way that you get to this building would be that you like climb up a few steps from the Rishus HaRabim into this like mirpeset area, okay? Which is within 10 tefachim of Rishus HaRabim, okay? And then from this mirpeset area, you then climb up to what's called the gag, the roof. The gag is really this like middle landing between the mirpeset and then the apartments above this gag, this roof. Okay, so you have like three kind of levels that we're talking about. We have the mirpeset, which is within 10 tefachim of the Rishus HaRabim. You then climb from the mirpeset to the gag, right, to this roof, which is really just like a landing. And then from there, you then climb up to, climb up a few stairs to get to these apartments that open up onto that, what we're calling the roof, okay? Now, the Havmina is to say that since the mirpeset, that first thing where you're climbing onto from the Rishus HaRabim is within 10 tefachim of Rishus HaRabim, maybe we'll consider it like the Rishus HaRabim, and therefore maybe we'll also consider that gag, that roof, that middle landing area to be also part of the Rishus HaRabim. In order to prove that wrong, we need a kavua ladder, a permanent ladder to be on this roof landing to the apartments above to show that the roof landing is really connected to the apartments and it's Rishus HaYachid and it's not connected to that mirpeset, which is within 10 tefachim of the ground, which is Rishus HaRabim. And Abaye wants to bring this as a proof to say that when you have something within 10 tefachim of each other, we consider it to be connected, right? That since this mirpeset is within 10 tefachim of the Rishus HaRabim, we'll consider it to be the Rishus HaRabim. Right, so Kihada Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel Gaga Samuch Rishus HaRabim. So if you have this roof, which is this middle landing, which is adjacent to Rishus HaRabim, right? It's not in a chutzner. Okay. Now, this landing doesn't have any walls or anything like that, right? The walls of this landing are just the fact that it's 10 tefachim above the ground, and therefore the walls, good asik, kind of go up. Okay, but it's like, other than that, you're really abutting Rishus HaRabim. So tzarich sulam kavua la'atiro. So if you want to be able to carry on this mirpeset, on this gag, on this middle landing, and it not be considered Rishus HaRabim, so then you're going to have a permanent ladder between this roof and the upper apartments in order to make this roof considered a Rishus HaYachid to be able to carry there. So sulam kavua in, sulam arai lo. We're saying that if there's a permanent ladder between the roof and those upper apartments, well, then you can carry on this roof. But if you only have a temporary ladder, then it wouldn't work, and we would consider it to be Rishus HaRabim. My timer, how come? So lav mishum dekevin de besoch asara da'adade kaime ason adade. Is it not because since the mirpeset, that first thing that you go from the Rishus HaRabim onto this mirpeset, is within 10 tefachim of Rishus HaRabim, we would consider the mirpeset to be part of the Rishus HaRabim. And then since you access then the roof from the mirpeset, that would also be considered Rishus HaRabim. So Abaye wants to bring a proof from there that when you have these two landings that are within 10 tefachim of each other, that they're considered connected. So Maskefla Rav Papa asks Akasha v'dilma k'shrab mechatvan olav b'chumta v'sudra, right? But maybe it's talking about where it has nothing to do with the 10 tefachim. It has to do with the fact that since you have people in Rishus HaRabim who are going to put things on top of this, right? Since there's no walls to this landing, to this roof landing thing, it's just adjacent to Rishus HaRabim, and people might end up putting things on there. So maybe that's why we would consider it to be part of Rishus HaRabim. But the obvious question is that we've never, we're like pretty much at the end of Masechta Ayruvin. We've learned all of Masechta Shabbos, all 157 pages of it. We've learned 85 pages of Masechta Ayruvin. The rule has always been that if you have something that is 10 tefachim tall and is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, it's a Rishus HaYachid. We never entertain the fact that since people might put things on it, it'll be Rishus HaRabim. And yet over here we seem to be saying that Rav Papa is suggesting that, well, maybe since people from Rishus HaRabim might put things on this roof landing thing, maybe it can be considered part of Rishus HaRabim. That's just never been a thing, right? If it's 10 tefachim tall and it's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, it's Rishus HaYachid. But anyways, Rav Papa wants to suggest that maybe the reason why we might think that this roof landing thing is a Rishus HaRabim is because people might put things there, but not necessarily because it's within 10 tefachim of like this mirpeset, which is within 10 tefachim of the ground. Yeah, that was kind of a roundabout kind of thing. But anyways, that was Masechta, so that was Daf Pei Daled of Masechta Ayruvin, and really the main thing that the Gemara was busy with was this question about when you have this area that is above 10 tefachim from the ground and also more than 10 tefachim away from the mirpeset. So it's essentially lazeh b'zrika, lazeh b'shilshul. So how do you deal with it? Rav says that it's also to both of them. Shmuel says that it's permitted to the one who goes down lower has to bend down in order to get it. And then we asked all sorts of questions, some in support of Shmuel, some in support of Rav, but we didn't necessarily get any conclusive answers there. We did have some complex ukimtas. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.